He thought it would be just another evening. A successful man, returning home a little earlier than usual, ready to surprise his family. But what he walked into was no ordinary moment. It was a nightmare hidden behind closed doors. His daughter, the one he trusted in another's care, was on the floor. And standing above her was someone he never imagined could turn cruel, her own stepmother. That single moment would change everything, because what he did next wouldn't just shock his household. It would leave everyone who heard the story speechless. For years, his life looked perfect from the outside. A millionaire, respected in his community, admired for his sharp mind and success in business. He lived in a grand home, the kind most people only dream of, and seemed to have everything a man could want. But beneath the polished surface, his family life was more fragile than anyone realized. After losing his first wife, he remarried, hoping to rebuild a sense of warmth and stability for his young daughter. At first, the stepmother appeared kind, charming even, eager to be seen as a caring guardian. To neighbors and friends, she smiled and played her role flawlessly. But within the quiet walls of their mansion, her true colors began to slip. The daughter, a gentle child who had already faced more loss than any girl her age should, tried her best to stay invisible, to keep the peace. She wanted nothing more than her father's love and a safe home. But when he was away chasing meetings, flights, and endless deals, the child often found herself facing moments of coldness, dismissiveness, and worse, cruelty disguised as discipline. No one outside the house knew. No one suspected. And he, blinded by trust and hope, believed his second marriage had healed their broken family. But fate has a way of revealing what's hidden. And on that day, when he stepped through his front door earlier than expected, he was about to discover the truth in the most devastating way. The sound of his keys echoed in the marble hallway as he pushed open the heavy front door. Normally, the house was filled with the scent of dinner or the gentle hum of music, but that evening there was only silence, followed by a muffled cry. He froze. It wasn't the cry of excitement or laughter he had longed to hear. It was sharp, broken, and filled with pain. He followed the sound down the corridor, his polished shoes pressing against the floor with growing urgency. Each step tightened the knot in his chest. Then he turned the corner, and the sight before him nearly stopped his heart. His daughter was curled on the floor, arms shielding herself, while her stepmother towered above, her face twisted with fury. The woman's foot had just swung back, ready to strike again. For a moment, time seemed to collapse. His mind raced, trying to reconcile the smiling face of the woman he had trusted with the monster standing before him now. His daughter, fragile and trembling, looked up through tear-filled eyes, silently pleading for help. Rage surged through him, the kind that doesn't shout but burns, quiet, sharp, and unstoppable. He had built empires, signed deals worth millions, faced rivals who wanted nothing more than to see him fail. But nothing in all his years had prepared him for this. His child, the one person he vowed to protect, was being hurt in his own home under his own roof. The stepmother froze when she saw him. Her face paled, the mask of composure cracking in an instant. She stammered excuses, words tumbling out about discipline and misbehavior, but he barely heard her. The air felt heavy, charged with something raw and dangerous. Neighbors later said they heard a crash, the sound of something shattering. Some claimed they heard shouting. Others said only silence lingered. But what is certain is that his calm demeanor, the one he wore in boardrooms and public speeches, was gone. In its place stood a father stripped down to his most primal instinct to protect. The daughter, still shaken, clung to the edge of the sofa, watching in disbelief. For the first time in her young life, she saw her father not as a distant figure of wealth and success, but as a shield, a force that even cruelty couldn't overcome. But the story didn't end there. What came next would not only determine the fate of his household, but also ignite whispers throughout the community. Because his reaction was not what anyone expected, not even his daughter. The room trembled with silence, broken only by the ragged breaths of his daughter. For a heartbeat, the millionaire stood motionless, his fists clenched, his chest heaving. Every instinct screamed at him to explode in rage, to tear apart the cruelty that had poisoned his home. But instead, something deeper took over. A cold, unshakable resolve. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes locked on the stepmother. She backed away, her excuses dissolving into stutters. The walls of the mansion that had once hidden her cruelty now betrayed her, amplifying every sound, every lie. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't shout. Instead, he reached down and lifted his daughter into his arms, shielding her trembling frame against his chest. The woman's face shifted from fear to desperation as she tried to justify herself.
"She was being disobedient," she whispered, voice cracking. "I was only teaching her."
But the words died in the air. He cut her off, not with violence, but with a gaze so sharp, so unyielding. It left her trembling more than any raised voice could. Then, with a steady voice that carried the weight of a man who had built his life on truth and power, he told her to leave. No negotiations, no second chances. In that moment, the marriage, the facade, the carefully constructed image shattered. She protested, cried, begged for forgiveness. But his silence was louder than any argument she could make. Neighbors later recalled seeing her storm out, clutching her belongings while he stood in the doorway with his daughter wrapped tightly in his arms. The image was unforgettable, a symbol of a man who had chosen love over appearances, protection over pride. Inside, his daughter's tears soaked into his shirt. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. He had heard her pain without a word, and in that moment, he realized that the empire he had spent years building meant nothing if he couldn't protect the one person who mattered most. It was a breaking point, a reckoning, and though the world would be shocked by his decision, the only eyes he cared about were the ones looking up at him, full of trust, fear, and hope. That night, the mansion felt different. The echoes of cruelty were gone, replaced by an unfamiliar silence. He sat with his daughter in the living room, the weight of her small hand gripping his as if afraid he might disappear. For hours he listened, truly listened to the quiet tremors of her heart, the fears she had buried, the pain she had carried alone. For the first time in years, he understood that wealth, power, and reputation were fragile shields if they failed to protect what mattered most. The empire he had built could collapse tomorrow, and it would mean nothing compared to the safety of his child. He had nearly lost her to neglect, not by strangers but by the blind trust he placed in the wrong person. In the days that followed, whispers spread. Some called him foolish for ending his marriage so abruptly. Others admired his courage, praising him for standing up against cruelty in his own home. But he didn't care for opinions. The only thing that mattered was the quiet smile that slowly returned to his daughter's face, the way she clung less tightly to his sleeve, learning once again that home could be safe. The incident left scars, invisible yet deep. But it also became a turning point. He promised himself never again to be too busy, never again to overlook the silent cries hidden behind closed doors. His daughter would grow knowing that her voice mattered, her pain mattered, and her safety was worth more than all the wealth in the world. This story isn't just about a millionaire or his household. It's about the truths we ignore until it's too late, the way silence allows cruelty to thrive, the way appearances can hide abuse. And it's a reminder that protection, love, and justice must begin at home. The question is, how many more children suffer in silence, unseen, unheard, waiting for someone to walk in early and finally notice?